Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and yours devil's advocate. So this time around, later on in the program, we're going to be talking about civil rights and the handicap, particularly Down syndrome. You want to stay with that one because it's important to me personally. But first, Proposition 103 to raise my taxes. A good guy, but my arch villain, Rollie Heath, State Senator, and representing me up in Boulder. Glad to have you.
Thanks, John. Glad to have you as a constituent as well.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was mutual. Talk to me a little bit about what Proposition 103 is. You've got it on the ballot, and what exactly does it do?
Well, I'll be very, very simple. It takes us back, the tax level back to where we were in 1999 when the state happened to be doing very, very well. It takes the sales tax back from 2.9% to 3%. That's 1/10 of 1%, a penny on $10, just to put it in perspective. And takes the state income tax back to where it was again in 1999 from 4.63 back to 5%.
Sounds nice. It just brings it back, but really you're talking about an 8% increase in income taxes. That doesn't seem like a small increase to me. It seems pretty sizable.
You remind me of the company that said their earnings went up 100% when they went from 1 cent to 2 cents. Yes, technically it's 8%, but it's 4.63 to 5 for a family making the median income in the state of $55,700. It's $150 a year, and I don't want to minimize that.
Well, hang on, it comes out to what? Something like $560 million a year into the general fund. Is that what the projection is? 536
is what
536. That's no small chunk of change for a state our size. This is a sizable increase. Let me ask you the basic question, which is, while the private sector growth is sitting around maybe 1% right now, why is it that our state government should get an 8% growth? Why should they get a raise of 8% when so many of us aren't getting a raise at all and the economy is stagnating?
The most important thing we can do to stimulate this economy is to grow jobs. And the most critical thing to grow jobs is to have an educated workforce and to educate your kids. I have had the wonderful opportunity to run a billion-dollar company. I've started 2 of my own. I've recruited a lot of people to the state, including a lot of companies, and invariably the first or the second question I'm ever asked is, tell me about the schools where my kids are going to go to school. Tell me about the institutions I'm going to hire my employees from. And when I moved here with a moderate governor, John Love, in 1970, we were at the top of the heap in terms of educating kids. I was able to recruit a lot of people here because we invested in our schools. In the last 40 years, we've gone from the top to the bottom. Right now, trying to recruit into a state, which basically higher education, we're funding CU less than 6% right now.
Let me see if I understand this. You believe that we're going to be able to create more jobs by increasing taxes 8%, and that by increasing taxes, that's going to stimulate the economy enough to bring jobs in? I'm having a hard time getting those two to work out.
What we need to do is start reinvesting in education in our kids. I know you've got kids. I've got 2 grandchildren in St. Vrain schools. We're spending right now more than $2,000 less per student than the national average in a state that's one of the wealthiest. And when we know that education is the key to our kids' future, it's the education to attract, it's the reason to attract businesses here if you invest in your education. We're not doing that, John, and that's what we need to do.
When you say we're not doing that, I remember a few elections here recently, including Referendum C, which brought in over $3.4 billion in the last 5 years, and is projected to bring in about the same in the next 3 years alone, and that was done for education. But beyond that, I remember a fight called Amendment 23, which said no matter what happens, every year the state is going to increase spending on education. Even if there's no money coming in to do it, we're going to do it. So it seems to me that we've been rather generous. And when you take the numbers of what we're spending for education and the number that you put us down at the bottom, that is a number of percentage of personal income. When you look at the raw data, we're right down in the middle. We're about 26 or 27 in the nation. Tell me, why, if we have Amendment 23, why, if we're bringing in $7 billion more through Referendum C, which was promised to go to education, how much more do you need? I mean,
John, the hard truth is the general fund today is exactly what it was 10 years ago. The general fund today is $6.8 billion. The general fund 10 years ago was $6.8 billion. So I don't know where you're getting all of these numbers, but those are the numbers.
I got those numbers from Legislative Council.
Well, John, look at the total numbers. It's $6.8 billion. What's happened is, because of all the constitutional issues, the state now is paying 2/3 of the share of the local share for K-12, where it was paying 1/3. So we've reversed that. There is no more money going into the system. It's the same $6.8 billion. And wait a minute, let me finish. We've got 100,000 more kids in school than we did 10 years ago. That's in K-12. We've got 40,000 more in higher education, and we're basically spending the same dollars in the general fund.
Don't we have a constitutional amendment guaranteeing that education spending goes up every year at least by inflation? And as a matter of fact, for the first 10 years, well beyond that. So we've got something that continues to grow even when the economy stagnates. Now, in an economy that's got we're working at between, what, 8% unemployment here in Colorado, I'm still trying to understand why government deserves a raise of 8% when there are people who are unemployed getting nothing. And the economy is stagnant at 1%. Why do you guys deserve that raise?
It's not you guys, it's us. It's your kids, it's my grandkids. It's what we're spending to educate our kids, and we're not educating them and not coming even close to the national average. If anybody can say to me that we're overspending in terms of educating our kids, which is the most critical thing I think you can argue between whether educating or providing a safe environment is the most important thing that state government does. To me, educating our kids is the most important. And when we have sunk to the levels that we have, I
must challenge you on that, because that's not the case. We're right in the middle.
No, we're not.
I tell you what.
We're not in the middle.
Absolutely. When you take a look at
there's no number that's lower than 30 seconds. So.
How is it that we've got neighboring states like Utah who are able to do their education for thousands of dollars less? Let's get back to the proposal. Does all this money go into education?
Yes, it does.
How do we know that?
Because we very careful in how we drafted it. The bill says that for 11-12 is the base budget. The legislature must fund to the base budget, and everything that comes in because of the increase in the taxes over the next 5 years, the increase in the income, must go to education.
But I'm confused. How do you know that the money coming in is because of the tax increase and not just a change in the economy? When Referendum C was passed, there was specific language that said every year Legislative Council will produce a report that shows exactly how much money is coming in, which is exactly where I got those numbers. Your proposal has no such reporting requirement. So how do we know that, and why didn't you put a reporting requirement in it?
Well, because what we did is we established 11-12 as the base year. So the legislature has to fund to 11-12. And rising tide, hopefully the economy goes up, rising tide raises all ships. So the money that would have to go in if we didn't have this above the 11-12 level obviously can go into other areas. So it was a very, very easy thing to do. And of course, 23, we got into factors. We're not funding the factors. If we were funding the factors, we're actually billions of dollars less than what Amendment 23 had anticipated.
Then why aren't you suing the state to enforce Amendment 23?
Well, because it was ruled that the factors were not a part of Amendment 23, that the language was not crystal clear.
Let me ask just kind of a basic question. Before we go for an 8% increase for government,
for schools. This is not for government. This is only for schools.
For government schools.
For public education. Yes.
Every tax increase is for the kids. We know this. Every tax increase is always for the kids, because if you said it was for corporations or anything else, it doesn't sell as well. That's why 23 sold well and Tabor sold well, because they were going to education. Shouldn't the legislature and the state look for savings and doing things differently before going for a tax increase?
I agree.
Do you?
Yes.
All right.
And I think we have, John. Listen, I've run businesses for 40 years in this state. I started one from scratch. We lost 90% of our business after being in business for 5 years, and we had to figure out how to stay in business. I have spent a lot of time trying to understand how we could save the money, and I believe we have done that. John Hickenlooper came in.
Well, let me ask you about this.
I believe
this is important. We put together a proposal to save over $1 billion a year called our Citizens Budget. Penn Fiffner did a fine job putting together a team, and we've put together lists of recommendations and actions, everything from Medicaid, which you guys increased it recently, to tuition tax credits, technical parole violations, all sorts of proposals. Now, we sent this to you. Did you tell me you've read this cover to cover before you did this?
No, I have not read this cover to cover.
Could I ask you to do that before this tax increase goes to the ballot?
Probably not. I've got my hands full. When did you send it to me?
I sent this to you at the beginning of the session. Hopeful that you would take some ideas from this. In fact, we did some briefings down there as well. But let me ask you: are you telling me there's not a single stone unturned? There's not a single bit of productivity to be found inside state government?
I'd be crazy to ever say that. John, any organization that you or I took over, you'd always...
How much savings do you think there is?
You'd always find, what, 1%? Maybe
1%?
Maybe 2%?
So when we found over $1 billion worth of savings, in fact, we're the only state in the country that still has the old age pension fund still working, where others have turned to Social Security, and that could save us $80 million a year right off the bat. There's simple things that can be done. You're telling me there's nothing?
Of course, there's always something, and I think we've done a great job. Hickenlooper has, as you know, has asked every one of his executive departments. I would not be doing this if I didn't feel that we had really looked at most of the places, and believe me, having to vote on this every year and looking at these budgets, I don't feel that there's
Why? We've only got about a minute left. Speaking of the governor, he hasn't endorsed this plan. Why not? And you expect him to? Your proposal?
I think he's going to stay neutral.
What about the Denver Chamber of Commerce, which has endorsed?
They are staying neutral.
What about Colorado Concern, which I know you've been very involved in?
No, I've never been involved.
I thought you were a member of
Colorado Forum.
Colorado Forum. All right. Colorado Concern.
They're all staying neutral.
Well, now Hickenlooper can sell ice to an Eskimo when it comes to a tax increase. I've seen him do it as mayor. Why are they staying neutral?
I think it's a question of timing. I happen to believe that the timing is now, and our kids can't wait. Our kids, your kids, our grandchildren in this case, they're in third grade once, and I think we owe them more than what we're doing.
This doesn't seem to be polling so well right out of the blocks.
There are no polls, John.
We've heard of a few. Let me ask you, has anyone asked you to pull this initiative?
To pull it?
To pull it.
No.
No one has asked you to pull it out?
No.
And if they did, would you consider it?
Of course not.
All right.
I'm committed to doing this, and I think we're going to pass it.
One last thing. You promise you'll at least flip through this before you raise my taxes 8%?
Sure.
All right, we got that. Senator, thank you so much. We'll be right back.